Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep, really deep, into the life of a figure who's, well, captivated imaginations for centuries. Miyamoto Musashi. Now, he's more than just, a legendary swordsman. He's this enigmatic and almost revered figure from feudal Japan. And what's so fascinating about his life is this unique blend of documented history and, enduring folklore.
You hit the nail on the head there. What makes Musashi so compelling, I think, is how he really embodies the very spirit of this incredibly turbulent era in Japanese history. It's important to remember he wasn't operating in a vacuum, right? His story is set against this backdrop of intense warfare. You have these shifting political alliances and, oh man, just fierce rivalries all around. To truly understand his journey, you have to understand that context. You have to.
Absolutely. And that's precisely our goal today. We're on a mission, you could say. We've been poring over, really immersing ourselves in some incredibly fascinating material. One piece that's particularly insightful is this article titled, The True Story of Miyamoto Musashi, the Lone Samurai. Yeah, a classic. And what we want to do is extract the core, the essence of his early years for you. We're going to explore everything from his family dynamics, his initial martial arts training, those defining early duels that really shaped him, and even the significant the spiritual encounter that, from what we understand, really played a pivotal role in his development. Ultimately, the goal is to understand the very foundations upon which this legendary figure was built.
I like that. Excavating the formative experiences.
Yeah,
Unearthing the roots of the legend.
exactly. So let's get into it. Now, the sources we've consulted pinpoint Musashi's birth in 1584 in Miyamoto village. And right from the start, his life was marked by a pretty profound loss, wouldn't you say? His mother, Omasa, she died during childbirth. You really have to consider the weight of that in such, a challenging period. What kind of impact do you think something like that might have had on a young life in those times?
Losing his mother at birth in, feudal Japan.
Mm.
That would have been an incredibly significant hardship. Back then, infant mortality rates were already high, so the added emotional weight, it must have been immense. It likely fostered a sense of independence, maybe even like an intense self-reliance that was born out of pure necessity.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if that early absence played a role, even subconsciously, in his later, famously solitary path.
It's fascinating, isn't it? So he was raised by his father, Musashi, and Musashi himself was a noted swordsman. He specialized in the jit, which, for our listeners who might not be familiar, is this sort of hooked truncheon, a pretty unique weapon. The sources all suggest that even from a very young age, Musashi started developing pretty remarkable martial arts skills under his father's direct tutelage. You'd almost assume a strong bond there, a natural connection, but it seems like the reality was a bit more, well, complicated.
Right. The picture we get from the sources is a bit more nuanced, wouldn't you say? They point to a relationship that was actually quite strained. This tension was apparently intensified by Musashi's, shall we say, fondness for sake, heavy drinking, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
So you have this dynamic where the father is both the teacher, the guide, but also a source of considerable, perhaps even resentment. And really makes you think, how might that have influenced Musashi's own approach to teaching or mentorship later on in his life?
That's a great question to ponder. And then there's another layer to this whole family dynamic. His uncle, Doran, was a Buddhist monk. Now, he tried to instill in young Musashi these principles of compassion and discipline. You can almost sense him recognizing this intense, maybe even a bit volatile spirit that the article talks about. But from what we gather, it seems like Musashi wasn't always the most receptive student when it came to, let's say, traditional teachings.
Right, right. And that resistance to, established norms is quite telling. It reveals something fundamental about his character, I think.
Yeah.
He wasn't one to simply accept things at face value. He questioned, he pushed back. This independent streak, this need to forge his own path, likely played a vital role in how he developed his unique fighting style later on, one that wasn't bound by the constraints of any existing school of swordsmanship.
And you see that so clearly, right? This friction between, on the one hand, adhering to tradition, which was largely embodied by his father's very rigid, very structured techniques, and on the other hand, Musashi's own innate drive to innovate, to break free. It's as if he was already pushing the boundaries of swordsmanship, even as a young boy.
Absolutely. And that pushback, that constant questioning, suggests a mind that wasn't satisfied with mere replication. He wasn't content with simply copying what came before. He was driven to explore, to evolve, to go beyond the established methods, even those of his own father. And that inherent desire to innovate, to create something truly new, that becomes a defining characteristic of his entire career, his approach to combat.
And that leads us to, well, maybe one of the most compelling parts of his early story. At just 13 years old, 13, Musashi defies his father and enters a real duel to the death. And his opponent, Arima Kihei, who's described as a seasoned samurai of the Shinto-ryu school. Talk about being thrown into the deep end.
Wow, 13. To put that in perspective, that's an age when most kids are still preoccupied with childish games and squabbles. But here's Musashi, going up against a seasoned, experienced warrior from a recognized school of swordsmanship. The odds were, to put it mildly, not in his favor. It makes his subsequent victory even more extraordinary. It really does. It makes you wonder about the level of guidance or control his father had at that point, right? Was this a case of perhaps a father living vicariously through his son? Or maybe even a deliberate attempt to, toughen him up, to expose him to the harsh realities of the warrior's path? What do you make of that decision? To allow or perhaps even encourage such a dangerous encounter for a boy that young?
Right. It's a decision that raises all sorts of questions about, like, responsibility and the ethics of, well, essentially sending a child into such a life or death situation. But putting that aside for a moment, the sources really highlight Musashi's astonishing courage and skill in that duel. And remember, he was armed only with a wooden sword. To face a trained samurai wielding a live blade with nothing but wood, I mean, that takes an incredible amount of nerve.
Oh, absolutely. It speaks volumes about his inherent raw talent, his natural aptitude for combat, and maybe, at that age, a certain fearlessness that borders on recklessness. To confront a trained samurai who's armed with steel with only a wooden weapon, that demonstrates a remarkable, almost, dare I say, unbelievable level of confidence, or maybe even a total disregard for his own safety. It's a bit unsettling, isn't it?
A little bit. And the crazy thing is, he didn't just survive, he actually won. He completely overwhelmed Kihei and delivered this decisive blow to the head, resulting in, his first mortal victory. That's a life-altering moment for anyone, but for a 13-year-old, it's almost too much to comprehend.
It is, isn't it? I mean, to achieve such a decisive victory at such a tender age and against such an experienced opponent, it must have been absolutely monumental for him. You can imagine the surge of adrenaline, the feeling of invincibility. It undoubtedly fueled his belief in his own abilities and, I suspect, played a major role in shaping his, shall we say, rather relentless fighting spirit.
Yeah, the sources definitely suggest that this triumph, this early and very dramatic success, ignited Musashi's ego and sort of set him on this path of relentless self-improvement. You can totally see how an experience like that, at such a crucial age, could define someone's future trajectory, their entire outlook.
Oh, absolutely. It's a powerful example of how these early experiences, these formative moments of challenge and, incredible success can have a profound, a lasting impact on who we become. This victory, in a sense, it instilled in him this deep, unwavering belief in his own capabilities and, I would argue, fostered an insatiable hunger to prove himself further, to push his limits within the world of martial arts.
But there's a flip side to this, isn't there? It wasn't all celebration and praise. This early win also earned him a bit of a reputation, a not-so-favorable one. He starts to be seen as this kind of impulsive and aggressive young warrior. Some even likened him more to a wild animal than, a traditionally refined samurai. There's a sense that his skills, while undeniable, came with a certain roughness, a lack of control.
It paints a vivid picture, doesn't it? You have this image of raw, untamed talent. He clearly possessed extraordinary skills, but perhaps lacked the discipline, the refined demeanor, the controlled focus that was typically associated with the samurai of that era. Think of it this way. He was this formidable force, yes, but not yet a true master of his own impulses. He was still very much a work in progress.
A diamond in the rough, maybe. So following this, Musashi enters this period of, while wandering, he's roaming the countryside, engaging in these spontaneous duels, constantly seeking out challenges, almost obsessively honing that raw ferocity. And then, amidst all this, he has this truly significant encounter with the Zen monk, Takuan Soho. This feels like a turning point, a pivotal moment in his development, wouldn't you say?
It is. You have this really compelling juxtaposition here, a contrast between Musashi's very aggressive, almost single-minded pursuit of martial dominance and the serene wisdom, the quiet contemplation of Zen Buddhism, which is perfectly embodied by Takuan Soho. This meaning, I think, underscores a critical aspect of Musashi's evolution, his journey. It marks the beginning of his eventual integration of mental and spiritual discipline alongside his formidable and, let's be honest, rather intimidating physical abilities. It's the start of something much deeper.
It's fascinating. The article even recounts this rather extraordinary episode where Takuan actually has Musashi captured. He's tied to a tree, unable to move. Talk about an unconventional and maybe even a bit shocking teaching method. I mean, who would have thought to restrain a warrior as a way to guide them?
It's a remarkable illustration of Takuan's, shall we say, unorthodox approach. He was clearly a master of understanding the human psyche, especially when it came to warriors. By physically restraining Musashi, he essentially forced him into a state of stillness, right? Complete inactivity. It's the total antithesis of his usual state of constant motion, that constant aggression, that he to always be challenging, always be fighting. This enforced inactivity likely created this space, this unexpected opportunity for Musashi to engage in some deep introspection. And who knows what demons he wrestled with during that time.
And that's precisely what happened, at least according to the sources. They all point to this experience as a catalyst for a crucial spiritual awakening for Musashi. It seems that swordsmanship at this point was no longer just about the physical act, the technique, the raw power. There was a deeper layer emerging.
Exactly. Takuan challenged him to go beyond, to look beyond just the application of brute force, of pure strength. He pushed Musashi to recognize the profound importance of, well, patience, mental clarity, and balance. And it's important to remember that these weren't presented to Musashi as just some abstract, philosophical concepts. They were presented as absolutely indispensable elements of the true path of Bushido.
And just for our listeners who might not be as familiar with that term, Bushido is often understood as the code of honor, the moral code of the samurai. It emphasizes these really core principles like loyalty, courage, self-control, and integrity.
Right, exactly. And so it wasn't enough for Musashi to just be a skilled swordsman, a fierce warrior, to truly master the way of the warrior, to embody the true spirit of Bushido. He needed to cultivate these inner qualities, these qualities of the mind and spirit.
So in a sense, Takuan's teachings were all about tempering that raw, untamed power, that almost feral energy, with mental discipline, with focused control. He was emphasizing that genuine warrior strength, true strength, originates from this harmony between mind and body. That's a pretty powerful concept, and it's a concept that has resonated through the ages, hasn't it?
It has. It's a concept that's as relevant today as it was back then. I mean, think about it. It suggests that true mastery in any field, not just swordsmanship, transcends mere physical prowess. It necessitates a deep understanding of oneself, of one's own mind, and the ability to maintain this unwavering composure, this acute focus, even in the midst of the most intense, even chaotic situations. It's about aligning the inner and the outer, the physical and the mental.
No, the article then shifts its focus a bit, bringing in the broader historical context once more. It starts to detail the escalating tensions between the Toyotomi and Tokugawa clans. This is where the stage is set for a major conflict. And Musashi, driven by, as the article puts it, a desire for honor and purpose, he makes the decision to join the Western Army under the Shinmin clan, a clan that actually had familial ties to his father's side.
That's interesting, isn't it? This decision, I think, really underscores Musashi's connection to his lineage, to his family history. It also reveals, perhaps, that despite his fiercely independent nature, his need to forge his own path, he was still very much influenced by these traditional loyalties, these familial affiliations. He felt this pull, this sense of belonging that tied him to his ancestors. Yeah.
It's almost as if, even with all his unique qualities, he couldn't completely escape the pull of tradition, of history. And that leads us to the pivotal Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. This was a truly monumental clash that fundamentally reshaped the entire political landscape of Japan. The article really vividly describes Musashi fighting with incredible ferocity, almost like a force of nature unleashed on the battlefield. You can almost picture it, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. The Battle of Sekigahara, it was a watershed moment in Japanese history. And Musashi's active participation in such a decisive, such a consequential conflict, it highlights his direct involvement in these major events of his era.
Yeah.
He wasn't just a bystander, he was right there in the thick of it. And the way he's described, fighting with this incredible, almost superhuman strength, this relentless energy, it reinforces that image of him as this exceptional, almost mythical warrior.
I love that the article even touches upon those, rather fantastic legends that claimed he fought with the spirit of a tengu. For those who might not be familiar, tengu are these mythical mountain demons, these powerful creatures that are renowned for their, supernatural martial abilities. It adds to the mystique, wouldn't you say? This aura that surrounds them.
Oh, absolutely. These legends, while they might be embellished over time, they speak volumes about the awe, maybe even the fear that he inspired in those who witnessed his skills firsthand. He's elevated beyond the realm of, an ordinary warrior. He becomes almost superhuman. And that contributes so much to the enduring power of his story, to his legend.
Sadly, though, as history tells us, the Western army suffered a pretty devastating defeat. This was largely due to Tokugawa Ieyasu's strategic brilliance, his cunning, and, well, let's be honest, a fair share of strategic betrayals on the battlefield. And this defeat, this turning of the tide, had profound and lasting consequences for Musashi's future.
Absolutely. The defeat at Sekigahara marked a critical turning point, not only for Musashi's personal journey, but for countless others who'd aligned themselves with the losing side. It ushered in this new era, an era of Tokugawa dominance. And it left many samurai, including Musashi, in a very precarious, a very uncertain position. Their world was turned upside down.
Exactly. In the aftermath of this monumental battle, Musashi finds himself a ronin, that is, a masterless samurai. He's forced to wander across Japan in search of, well, meaning, purpose, direction. His cherished Shinmin clan was dismantled. His patron lord Ukita Hide was exiled. It's as if, as the article aptly puts it, he was completely adrift, cast out, without an anchor.
The loss of his clan, of his lord, that would have been a profound blow. We have to remember that in the rigid social structure of feudal Japan, a samurai's identity, their purpose, it was deeply, inextricably tied to their allegiance. Becoming a ronin, a masterless samurai, it meant the significant loss of status, loss of security, and really any clear path forward in life. It was a time of great upheaval and uncertainty for so many.
And the sources we've looked at really highlight this internal conflict that Musashi must have grappled with during this time. Imagine being torn between his loyalty to the fallen Toyotomi cause, to his past, and the stark necessity of adapting to this new reality, this new order under Tokugawa rule. His very identity, who he was, and what his destiny held, it was suddenly shrouded in uncertainty. He was at a crossroads.
Absolutely. It must have been a time of deep soul-searching for him. This period of intense uncertainty, this extensive wandering, it likely forced Musashi to confront some fundamental questions about his own identity, his purpose, and his place in the world. It went far beyond simply being a warrior in service to a particular lord. It was about defining himself anew. And in a sense, it laid the groundwork for his subsequent development, not only as this unparalleled swordsman, but as a thinker, a philosopher, a man of depth and insight. It's a reminder that sometimes these periods of great upheaval, they can also be periods of tremendous growth.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? That sometimes it's when we're most lost that we're most open to transformation. So, as we reflect on these formative early years of Musashi's life, I think several key themes really emerge. The sources all emphasize this intriguing duality within him, this duality of warrior and philosopher. You see this constant tension between the raw, almost brutal violence of those early duels and his later, more profound embrace of the ideals of Bushido and Zen, the outer and the inner.
Right, right. This inherent duality, this inner tension, it's absolutely central to understanding who Musashi was, the complexity of his character. He wasn't just a highly skilled, incredibly fierce warrior, a killer. He was a man of depth, a thinker who was constantly seeking to find a deeper, more profound meaning within the path he had chosen, the warrior's path. His life, in a sense, represents this ongoing, this dynamic interplay between intense action, the outer world of combat, and deep reflection, the inner world of the mind and spirit. It's a balancing act, isn't it?
It is. And we also see this compelling theme of, the wild versus the disciplined. We witness that untamed, almost feral energy in his youth, his impulsive actions, his relentless pursuit of duels, always needing to prove himself. And then you contrast that with the discipline, the mental fortitude that he starts to cultivate after his encounter with Takuan. It's almost like a before and after picture. It's a powerful illustration of personal growth, of transformation, of refining one's raw potential.
Absolutely. It's a compelling narrative, this transformation from raw potential to something more refined, more controlled, more masterful. You see him taking this extraordinary, this almost primal talent and channeling it through rigorous discipline, through this unwavering mental fortitude. It's a story that resonates deeply with, I think, the universal human journey of mastery in any field, in any pursuit, whether it's the arts, athletics, or even something like business or leadership. We all go through this process of refining our raw talent, of honing our skills.
And finally, we can't overlook the significance of the historical backdrop, can we? I mean, the tumultuous warring states period, the decisive Battle of Sekigahara, these weren't just dates in a history book for Musashi. They were the very crucible that forged his early life. He was confronted with profound loss, constant change, immense societal upheaval. These are experiences that, while perhaps not in the same form, many of us can still relate to in our own lives, right?
Absolutely. The historical context, it provides this essential framework for understanding the immense challenges and the, often limited opportunities that Musashi faced in his early years. It illustrates how these external forces, the tides of history, can dramatically shape an individual's life, their choices, and compel them to adapt, to evolve, and ultimately to redefine themselves. It's a powerful reminder that we're not always in control, that sometimes life throws us curveballs, and we have to find a way to navigate them to make sense of them.
So, to bring together the key threads of this initial chapter of Musashi's extraordinary story, let's recap. We've explored his tragic beginnings, the loss of his mother at birth, his rather complex relationship with his father. We've seen the early and fierce development of his exceptional martial spirit under his father's tutelage. We've delved into that deadly first duel at the incredibly young age of 13, and then we witnessed that truly transformative encounter with the Zen monk Takuan Soho, an encounter that initiated the crucial process of, well, tempering his inherent wildness with a deeper sense of discipline, a more profound understanding of the true warrior's path, the path of Bushido. It's been quite a journey so far, wouldn't you say?
It has. And we can't forget, of course, the profound significance of the Battle of Sekigahara, the turning point. It left him a ronin, stripped of his previous allegiances, without a clear path forward. But it also set him on a course that would ultimately lead him to achieve legendary status, to become Miyamoto Musashi, the Sword Saint. It's a reminder that sometimes even out of defeat, even out of loss, something new, something extraordinary can emerge.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What early experiences, those challenging moments, those pivotal encounters, those defining victories and defeats have shaped your own journey. How do you see those early influences, for better or worse, still playing a role in your life even now?
It's fascinating, I think, to consider these parallels, these echoes in our own experiences as we delve into the life of, well, a figure as seemingly distant, as seemingly different from us as Miyamoto Musashi. It's a great question to reflect on. This initial exploration into Musashi's formative years, I think, serves as a powerful reminder that even the most legendary figures, those who seem almost superhuman, they all have these foundational experiences, these early influences that lay the groundwork for their later achievements, their later triumphs. And gaining a deeper understanding of those early influences, it provides us with invaluable insights into their complex characters, their underlying motivations, their struggles, and ultimately their humanity. It reminds us that they were once like us, navigating the uncertainties of youth, trying to find their place in the world.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive into the early life of Miyamoto Musashi. It's been truly illuminating. But as we've seen, this is just the beginning of his extraordinary story. There's so much more to uncover, so much more to explore about his remarkable path to becoming a true sword saint, the author of the timeless and, might I add, incredibly insightful Book of Five Rings. And don't worry, we will delve deeper into those subsequent chapters, those later adventures and insights in future deep dives. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those deeper layers of understanding.